Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Supply Chain Talk. I'm Ana Maria Velica, founder and director at Green Apple's Career, and I'm your host today. Thank you for being with us. We have an amazing episode, quite a niche topic, building stronger supply chains through due diligence and resilience. Before I invite my experts and guests on the stage, I would like to welcome our audience. If you join us via the website, please get the full episode experience, engage with my panelists, address questions and comments, because the best question and comment will be rewarded with a Supply Chain Talk mug, which will be couriered by my colleagues at Business Reporter. And if you watch us and engage with us via LinkedIn, hello, and please make some buzz and address some questions for our experts. So today's episode, Building Stronger Supply Chains Through Due Diligence and Resilience, has a panel of three guests, which I will invite shortly. I would like first to invite Federico Marchese. Hello, Federico.
Hi, Anna. Nice to talk to you again.
And to see you again. Federico is the Chief Supply Chain Officer for Hire Europe. He has 15 years experience in different roles in supply chain across consumer goods, retail, and automotive. Federico ended up working in supply chain almost by mistake after a degree in electrical engineering and research on complex system controls. And ever since, Federico found his space in complex systems, numbers, risk management, and today at Business Reporter, Supply Chain Talk.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here. My second guest is also a regular guest, Nanda. Can you please turn on your camera and mic? It's good to have you. It seems very sunny where you are. Nanda Kishore is Vice President Sourcing at Evoy. He's based in Norway. He has experience in international supply chain with a track record of building and scaling supply chain functions and processes globally for over 28 years. And Nanda has worked across heavy engineering, automotive, marine, and renewable energy sectors, and has made extensive contribution in sustainable supply chains in new regions and countries. He's a very avid outdoor enthusiast, runs half marathons and high altitude mountains such as Kilimanjaro, Everest, Lobush, and last summer, Mera Peak. This is incredible. Last but not least, my third guest is Ty Francis. Hello, Ty.
Hi, Anna, how are you?
Good. It's good to have you, Ty. Ty MB is the Chief Advisory Officer at LRN, the world's largest pure-play ethics and compliance company. Ty also leads the company's advisory and corporate board services. Ty is a Welsh American subject matter expert in GRC, ethics, and culture. And he spent over a decade in New York City, where he was EVP of the Ethisphere Institute, if I pronounce it correctly. And prior to that, vice president at the New York Stock Exchange Governance Services Division. In 2017, Ty was awarded an MBE by Queen Elizabeth II, recognizing services to businesses. So this is impressive, and we have an amazing panel discussion. You can't miss out our talk show today. So as you know, we start our discussion tackling a news item. And together with our producer, we chose one which is upcoming in 2027, a mandatory human rights due diligence in supply chain. as part of the EU corporate sustainability due diligence, these mandatory human rights will become mandatory, will be tracked year on year. And as a result, any suspicion of forced labor in the supply chain will become a prohibited trade. And I would like to invite you to express your thoughts. Nanda, what do you think about the news item?
Okay, so I go first. No, I think it was much awaited, and even though there was a bit of due diligence being done by companies in the past, like Nestle and others, they're sort of pioneered in this. And now we are now seeing many countries coming into making this as a mandate. I think we have this called as a Norwegian Transparency Act in Norway. It's implemented from 2022 July 1st. So where we have a right to go and access the labor and their supply chain into up to a level of tier 3 or tier 4. And this is all looking very good, but that also brings a challenge for companies as to how they can manage this resources or what tools can be used. So it will be interesting discussion, I think, today's topic.
Thank you. You mentioned one of the employer I worked for, Nestle, and yes, I think when you manage certain industries like food, they really need to pioneer and be at the forefront. Federico, what's your experience with the news item? Do you agree with it? Disagree?
Yeah, I mean, I think supply chain in general needs to develop and become better in both as a business requirement, but also as an ethical requirement. So I very welcome what's going on. I think the real opportunity we're having is there will be definitely a certain cost and complexity to become compliant for companies, but it opens up company to have a more structured approach to risk management, to audit supply chain of the different type of supplier. So it's definitely opening up supply chain to become more resilient and preparing, I would say, a very healthy discussion with different supplier in a regulated framework, at least.
Mm-hmm. I like the structured approach, Federico, indeed. Tai, what are your thoughts? And from your experience, please, how do you, what are your thoughts about the news item?
So I've been looking at this from a US perspective as well as the UK, and look, it's always surprising because the UK tends to take its time when it comes to kind of reinforcing some of these regulations. If you look at the UK Bribery Act, that was really after the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act came out in the US. Again, with the AI kind of regulatory kind of traffic that's happened in Europe, the UK has come with more of a kind of progressive look to this. I'm happy that the UK is under spotlight for this now. If you look at back in September, the Department of Justice in the US specifically reported that they were going to be more severe when they were talking to companies about the due diligence of their supply chains and their third parties. So it's a wave. You see it in the Norton Rose article with CSDDD, German Supply Chain Act. The UK is falling behind, and I think especially in the US, well, in the previous administration anyway, they were pushing for companies to do more than just do the due diligence at the start. They want more periodic reviews. So it's good news.
Good news, yeah. Thank you, Tai. And now if we can talk more in detail and share your expertise, please, with our beautiful audience. Let's go into mitigating third-party risks and ensuring operational security with effective due diligence, because modern slavery and mandatory human rights it's only one element of the multitude of due diligences that are needed in a very resilient supply chain. So what's your experience, Nanda, in terms of mitigating third-party risks to ensure this due diligence?
Yeah, so when we speak about due diligence, so there is one other thing which also goes back to back. One is due diligence is done sort of before you take a decision, you sort of make a due diligence, but then afterwards, it's also a responsibility to set up a governance mechanism to have a good oversight on that. And then the challenge we normally face. For example, I was doing a due diligence audit in one of our suppliers, and everybody was so happy. It was a OEM product. And then we started to look into their sub tiers. So that was new to them. They said, why do you need to know our suppliers? We take care of everything. You get a full product. But we still went through the discussions. And then we realized a couple of their suppliers were based out of a geopolitical situation country. And they were also surprised because they couldn't keep up their commitments to us. So we had to start a completely small mini project to outsource some of their sub-suppliers into a different zones, etc. So my experience is this looks very good on paper, but awareness is not there in many of the companies. And then the regulations, what we read in the article, that's sort of bringing in the seriousness. But I still see most of the companies are not very clear. What do they look for in a due diligence and how do they get it? And how can they help analyze the data? So I think we still have some open questions, but it's a good start we are doing. But my message is due diligence should always go with a governance or oversight plan to maintain the supplier in the future also.
Thank you, Nanda. And be very clear on what you measure. What are your criteria, like a background check, financial checks, reputational risk, robust contracting. So lots of criteria you need to consider, an enabler, a platform to enable that data gathering in order to assess a supplier, for example. Federico, from your experience, how do you approach mitigating third-party risks to ensure this?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I always start with the concept that when you run a supply chain, you are bottom line running a complex system with multiple actors. Some of them you have direct control, some of them you have indirect control, some of them you have almost no control at all. So that's always one of the mindset that I have when I set up a complex supply chain. And as well as all the complex system, I mean, you can do the best due diligence, but then in reality, you care about what's happening the day-to-day. So that's why I'm more prone to look at risk matrix or risk mitigation action on my day-to-day. And of course, there are multiple factors to mitigate. And typically what I learn operating in manufacturers is there are a couple of actions, I would say 3 actions where we always invest a lot to make sure that we have a control over risk in the chain. One is stock. At the end of the day, whether we like it or not, independently what is the cost of it, stock is our final edging we can have about disruption. So I make sure that not only we manage our stock to mitigate risk, but also our suppliers and our partner in the chain do the same with their different tier. Visibility, that's another area that is getting a lot of traction. There are new solutions thanks to technological development that allow real-time visibility. I think also the propensity of company to integrate better and share more data, being less jealous of their own, is helping company on building up better visibility in the process of the partners. And finally, I'm having some real cases going on building digital twin using information of our partner to simulate how they're operating, what risks they might be exposed, using all the new nice technology we're having in terms of digital twin and AI and machine learning and so on.
Yeah. Yes, Federico, very good. Ty, what's your experience in terms of mitigating third-party risks? What do you advise your clients, your mentees?
Well, I'll pick up on what my 2 panelists just said. Like it's due diligence is an ongoing process. It's not just a one-time check, right? It's this continuous monitoring of who you're dealing with. But also understanding that not all suppliers are the same, and so high-risk suppliers, they need deeper scrutiny. And we're talking manufacturing, healthcare, tech. We only have to look at the Cloudflare kind of issue that happened in last year. The fact that it kind of transversed across multiple different industries and caused billions and billions worth of damage. I think data, as Federico said, I mean, using data and analytics and AI as a force multiplier is incredibly important to especially in automation of some of these risk assessments that we're putting out for suppliers. And that's going to help us not only identify red flags early on, but if we're looking at benchmarking data, look at what we were doing last year or last month, we can start to identify trends that will help us kind of protect ourselves in future months. So, data is not our enemy, data is our friend. And as long as we can make sure we're siloing this data correctly and then kind of using that data, not just longitudinally, but also looking at what our peers are doing as well, I think that's a pretty crucial way of mitigating what's going to happen next.
I love it. Yeah, data enablement. Some companies are more advanced than others. I worked for big corporations who had the investment to build what you said, Federico, digital twin to simulate any possible black swan scenario. And if we think about training our third party, because definitely awareness, as you said, Nanda, on the paper, everything looks good, but how do you translate that best practice, that transformation needed in knowledge transfer? How do you transform that process into a training? What's your experience with training your third party to reinforce this compliance, to reduce risk?
So, yeah, sorry, a quick question. When you said third party, whom are you referring to? Is it the one who does the due diligence or the supplier or us? Okay, but most importantly, before we step on to due diligence, I think there is a bit of training and awareness to be created within each individual companies, because sometimes we have a technical team who discussing with the supplier and they sort of finalize the product, and then they say, okay, purchase, you go and buy it. And then these guys start doing the due diligence, because then the essence of due diligence is lost. Due diligence is something you do before you commit or you do start the discussions. So that means the knowledge transfer comes afterwards. First comes your preparedness and acceptance within your company that this is the practice. So we need to assess technical risk, financial risk, everything before an engineer picks up and says, I like your product, I'll ask my purchase to buy from you. So I think that it starts from there, and then each company have their own objectives, the reason and what's the criteria they need. And that depends on their own product requirements in the field and customers, etc. So from my point of view, most of the due diligence is best done by the company representatives themselves. It's not an ISO or a typical audit.
If you have the
Yes, so we know what we want, rather than asking some third party to just please go and audit them. They will go with a questionnaire, say yes, 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 no, no. I don't believe in that. So that's my answer to you.
Yes, yes. Also, there are many examples like SEDEX. You need SEDEX. You need EcoVadis. Those are third parties. Why?
Yes.
Because you need to keep to stay away, to remove any biases that organizations might have. So then you need third-party experts, objective, who are world class to audit some of and to assess some of those risks. Federico, what's your view in terms of training your third parties or training in general to reduce the risks?
Yeah, so what we're doing now, and I need to be honest, we're probably at the very early stage. I'm applying something I learned from automotive, where there's been more development and more advanced application. We are partnering up with some of our partners, either supplier or customer, even in some cases. We are openly sharing how our supply chain works. We are really running workshop together on trying to apply different logic. We are showing our result when we apply digital twin on their own process, to get together an understanding upon how we can optimize. What is the impact on some failure in a process down to the stream? And we're really trying with the objective to get out from the typical, I would say, customer-supplier relationship where you are jealous of your data and you just negotiate on a price or service level, but really to try to use the intelligence and expertise and knowledge of the whole supply chain team involved in the chain to design better solutions that become more resilient and end up benefiting everyone in the chain. I mean, our supplier, ourselves, and finally our customers as well.
Yeah, thank you for this example. Ty, what's your experience in terms of providing training to help an organization really champion this compliance, risk, and due diligence?
Well, I think to a certain extent, we should look at suppliers and third parties the same way we look at our own employees at a base level, because, you know, we're trying to understand how our third parties operate, how they work, but we also want them to understand how we as a company work. So I think you've got kind of three things. It's, you know, why training should matter, you know, what good and effective training looks like, but also, you know, what are the challenges and what are the solutions? And the way we look at it is suppliers are normally a company's weakest link, right? So by training them, by giving them some, you know, information about, you know, how we do things, what we do, helps them understand not only our expectations, but industry regulations as well. You know, I speak to, we have thousands and thousands of customers all over the world, and I'm still talking to large billion-dollar companies who are sending out 14-page PowerPoints to companies with a DocuSign saying, read this, sign it, send it back. And it kind of, they feel like it absolves themselves to say, we told them this. A friend of mine, Adam Balfour, he's the Chief Compliance Officer of Bridgestone. He equates this as the cabin crew on an airline, going back to the captain and saying, hey, we just delivered air safety training to 350 passengers. And the captain going, great. But you know as well as I do that those passengers, 3/4 of them haven't even heard what they're talking about. So you couldn't really guarantee that those passengers know what to do in the event of emergency. So by kind of creating training, making it tailored, making it risk-based, and also looking at who are we training? There are high-risk vendors who need deeper tailored training and more engagement, low-risk vendors that could use off-the-shelf training, making them understand or getting them to understand what we do as a company and what's out there, what the risks, I think is critical now. And the DOJ in the US is starting to ask companies when they've had critical failures within the supply chain is, you know, we get you did your due diligence before, and we get you check them once every 2 years or whatever mandatory place you're in. But, you know, how do you know they really understand your business? How do you know that they understand your code of conduct and how you're supposed to act? Because remember, if you're a company based out of the UK and you're doing business with a company based in Germany, do they have the same values as you? And are they applying that? And how do you measure that? So without any data, so these people sending out these DocuSigns, they're getting one person from a vendor signing it saying, yeah, we've all done it collectively. But how do you know if it's worked? Going back to the kind of cabin safety training.
Exactly.
And look, it's hard, right? This kind of training is seen as a road bump to people, as a hurdle. You know, it's slowing the process down. Procurement is saying, look, we need to onboard these people quickly. Sales are saying we need to deal with these companies faster. And then compliance are in the middle going, hang on, 5 more questions and then we'll be done. But I think that if you're using data analytics, you're using a large scale training solution, you can start to track which vendors aren't doing the training, which vendors are the slowest to do the training. And you can start to risk profile those vendors and those suppliers into, well, actually, year on year, these vendors are failing A, B, C, and D. Should we be even dealing with them anymore?
Thank you, Ty. I'm already, very good. I feel like I'm on a training now, being trained by you. I would like to pick up a comment from the audience. Alex Way, in relation to our news item, Alex, you mentioned about in some countries, it is totally normal that young family members do contribute to the family wealth, if we like it or not. Correct. Stopping businesses is putting the kid as well as the family in difficult situation. How would you treat this situation? From my expertise, because as we speak, I also provide mentoring in procurement sustainability to organization. Child labor is, you need to make sure that depending on the geography, on the respective geography regulation, you do the child labor thing within that context. So you need to localize it, because child labor and the age in Turkey is very different to probably child labor in Africa. So yes, it's a really good comment. Nanda, anything to comment on Alex Wei's contribution?
So in general, in principle, child labor is prohibited, but the definition of the age limit of a child is always a question. But sometimes it so happens when you work with large raw material suppliers in Africa or in Colombia or in some places, so there is a reason behind those kind of employment, but then there is a corporate social responsibility for us as a customer to educate them and provide them a means to sort of get them educated, because we are contributing to the good of the society when we are pulling up raw materials and natural minerals from Senegal or from anywhere else. So we can't just ignore the fact that, yes, of course, it's okay if they are 16 years, that's okay as per law, but we know that the kid needs better education. So we have an obligation. And in my previous experiences, we did this. We opened up schools, we told them how they should get educated. We brought that awareness, even though they were legally authorized to work, but the community sort of appreciated this effort. I think that should be the motto for all. Instead of looking at exiting or challenging, we should encourage. But that's why I mentioned as an answer that partnership is important. And as Ty mentioned, the key in partnership is understanding the values. So then things become very easy.
Yes, thank you, Nanda. And I would like to debate more, a bit more about building operational resilience through stress testing to prepare for disruption. And I remember my days in procurement when we, together with the leadership, we pulled together a business continuity plan. And actually, we acted upon it. So it was a business continuity plan with clear, very detailed, very granular, in order to make sure that if something happened, and it happened actually with the COVID and pandemic, how can we work? So we did lots of scenario planning in order to understand, okay, procurement is crucial, these roles are critical, these demand planning and supply planning roles as part of the supply chain are critical. In a disaster, how do we act? So what's your experience with business continuity plans, with crisis response plans, Federico?
Yeah, absolutely. That's an area that I've been, as I said before, we are using a lot of new technology, especially digital twin. We look at simulation in a different framework. We look at simulation on the way of, what's in for us, what's the benefit of a specific decision that we might take. But we always use the same simulation also as a stress test. If something goes bad, how much I can still serve my customer before I start to have real issue. If there is a major disruption on the shipping, how much is going to cost me? Can I still sustain the business? And what are my best alternatives? So what we are learning is we can build more resilience. So out of the simulation, we learned that there is more resilience we can build working with our partners. We are making very obvious, both upstream and downstream, that there are better solutions for the old network. We are learning very quick also how to simulate potential disaster. I mean, we learned at the beginning, we didn't know exactly what we were testing for, but looking at past what happened in the last probably 5 to 6 years, we can exactly say, well, a problem might happen in this specific area, and it's giving us a lot of learning. Bottom line, what we are learning now is it all boils down to you need to make sure you have the skill set ready for tough periods. People needs to feel they contribute, and specifically in tough period, you need to have people that are engaged for extensive period of time. Disruption lasts longer than what we think usually. As I was saying, stock is a real edge. When you operate a supply chain, inventory helps you. it makes sure you can still fulfill the customer, you can still get some cash in, and you can still pay some of your bills as long as you have it. And finally, I mean, data are helpful. The sooner you get this weak signal that something is going bad, the earlier you can react, and the less costly it is typically your reaction.
I love it. And you covered upstream, downstream. Ty, what's your experience with building operational resilience through these plans, BCPs, crisis response?
Well, I think that you come at it from two angles, right? So the UK's FCA, the resilience rules, they require financial firms to prove that they can handle third-party failures. I mean, I referenced CrowdStrike before, but we need to learn from the major disruptions that have happened with COVID, the supply chain collapse. That exposed so many weaknesses and some of the single source dependencies we saw. And going to Federico's point, this just-in-time inventory models kind of fell apart very quickly. We need to be regularly assessing suppliers' own contingency plans. They need to prove to us that they have a BCP, but also, it doesn't have to be everyone. It's that our critical vendors. Do you have a BCP now? And then maintain like an alternative supplier kind of group for those essential components that we need to look at to kind of stopgap. I think you look at CSDDD, you're looking at it mandates stronger oversight of suppliers' resilience planning. So a whole continent is asking companies to make sure that they're not only their own contingency plans are set, but those of their suppliers are set as well. So, and going back to the education part, is educating our third parties on what their value should be and what their part in all this should be. What is their responsibility in this whole chain? And then only then can you go back and start to stress test how your own plan is working. Because remember, it's like the 100 windows scenario, right? Just because 99 of your windows are locked doesn't mean you're 99% kind of secure. It just means you're 100% exposed on that 100th window.
Thanks, Jai. We have comments. I think we have a contender for the Supply Chain Talk mug. Alex Way, complimenting you, Nanda. Love it. Education is the only way out of it, and companies sourcing should pay a fee to support for every piece they buy. Inventory is usually on the wrong SKU. Yeah, thank you, Alex. Keep commenting and keep asking questions. Definitely, it's really important talking about building and testing everything. I remember testing a scenario where, as you said, Ty, trust is good, control is better, especially with so many regulations in supply chain. We cannot just trust our suppliers or partners. They signed off a contract, but we need to make sure that we bring along experts, third parties, and also we as companies, we have a duty of care to audit our suppliers, to make sure that do you comply with child labor, because this is crucial for us. I worked for food, for Nestle. And there were several scandals worldwide, because the supply chain, the more global you are, the more complex supply chain you have. So it's so tough to control the last child, the last nephew, of your farmer. So it's super, the responsibility that comes with leading complex supply chain is major. So we need to make sure that we bring along even ONGs. And now when I mentored this organization, I work with an ONG because they are more powerful than me in modern slavery. And they are best in class. So we bring people who have the power to influence and to change immediately. Any more thoughts from your side, Nanda, in terms of BCPs, backup plans to prepare for disruptions?
Yes. Oh, there are many comments. You have to stop me. So I'll start with complementing your code. So trust is good, control is better, monitor is best. So we can't stop at control. But look at all of these things we are speaking about. As Federico mentioned about inventory, I mentioned about checking, scenario testing. All of that comes with a cost. So we are in a very critical position as supply chain leaders, where we are expected to have all the stress testing done, inventory, backup, everything ready. But then we are also required to reduce the total cost of ownership. And that those two don't go together. So you build up inventory, you end up with having more cost on your side, and suddenly you make a change on your product, then you're wasting your money on that. So I would, in my experience, what I've been doing is we're looking at supplier partnerships, because I come back to what I said in the beginning. It's all about value. So the most important thing in a supplier relationship or partnership is make sure the supplier or partner understands your values correctly. Then they start appreciating and then work towards supporting it. Otherwise, all of this, you cannot predict, you cannot have every scenario tested, and it costs money. So yeah, you cannot control everything. It's better that everybody does a bit of it. So spread the inventory across your supply chain, so then you don't have a big chunk at any one part of the supply chain. Is one example. Monitoring it and periodical, participating in the suppliers planning and production planning control activities, and that sort of brings up the partnership to be more stronger and stronger. So stress
I
was
agree.
very good pre-COVID, but it costs a lot. It has a lot of consequences. So you need to say, it's very easy, as Federico mentioned. If it's a mechanical product, you can do simulations, digital twin, but you're talking about supply chain disruptions. You cannot predict, you cannot test it to really squeeze the supply chain to see. It costs money. You can't do that. But there are better ways to sort of predict, and best is to always be in contact and have a good oversight plan.
Yes, Nanda, it's almost impossible mission to be a supply chain leader nowadays with so many risks, because you need to assess and you need to prioritize the likelihood of and the impact of your risks in supply chain. But this is the job of a supply chain. It's not an easy one. Anything, Federico, to add in terms of, I don't know, an example for the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to echo a couple of points that Nanda said. First of all, our job is quite complex, and maybe that it's just me, but that's why I love it so much. Yeah, and you're actually right. I mean, the complexity of dealing with network and supply chain is that, like, all the complex system, when they fail, they tend to fail because of people. I mean, people are not performing the checks, or people are over-relying on their own capabilities and so on. So that's usually what happened. And it's very difficult to find out exactly what didn't work. So I don't disagree with the concept that, bottom line, we need to manage always a trade-off between the service, the reliability, the cost, and the cash, etc. So that's our work. Now, we rely on people to make sure that there are controls to avoid system to fail. And people it's incredible. When you look at people, they're incredibly driven by a couple of very small things. One is monetary. Yes, this pays off very well. The second one is moral and ethic. You need to make a moral and ethic stand on why you do certain things. And this need to be shared by the company, by the people working for the company, by the people who engage outside our company. And in the frame of this one, of course, we need to, especially in this nowadays globalized world, we need to be extra cautious upon how different culture perceive some of these, I would say, ethical and commitment, because we might have a different understanding, going back to what we were discussing earlier upon child labor.
I love the ethics, and we have an expert with us at the table who cannot wait to express the ethical side, because ultimately all these risks and regulation come on the back of we need to become more responsible supply chain, we need to be more visible, we need to be more ethical, and we need to be more environmental friendly, because what's happening everywhere, the planet is getting upset. So we see the transformation of the high industrialization in real time. So definitely it comes with a cost, with an assumed cost. In relation to the ethic side of building this resilient supply chain, Ty, what are your views?
Well, look, again, I'll echo Nando again. It all comes down to values. I mean, we say that rules are good, but values are better. And I think that, you know, you're talking about companies who spend a lot of time and effort and money, you know, talking about their strategy, talking about their culture, their companies, and their values that they adhere to, and why they've weathered the storm over decades and decades. You know, I was in Mumbai a couple of weeks ago talking at Tata Group's annual ethics forum, and their chairman said, look, you know, it's great that we have these values, but we have to make sure that not only our group companies are, you know, holding true to these values, but the people we work with are holding to these values as well, because you want to make sure that you're aligned. And I think people forget that supply chain resilience isn't just a risk mitigation effort. It's a competitive advantage. You know, companies that, well, they say companies that quickly respond to shocks outperform those that scramble. And so if you are proving that your supply chain is resilient, it's aligning to your values as well, your partnership that you're going to have with these companies is going to be a lot smoother, and there's going to be more of a trust embodied with them. The same way that you would, you know, say this to your employees, and they say that, you know, most cyber threats come from insider threats inside your company rather than outside attacks. The same way with supply chain as well. It's great that companies are now introducing their suppliers to their own codes of conduct and asking them to attest that they've read it and they understand it. But I think also, you know, it's important to make sure that they understand the environment that these companies are working in at the same time, because that stress testing, again, isn't theoretical. I think, you know, with the FCA's new rules that are coming out in March this year, I mean, it's next month, companies are going to need to step up to the fact and hope that their monitoring and due diligence efforts have been robust enough that if something does happen, that they're not going to get caught short. You know, I think if you're going to spend the time and effort to release training into your company, to write a great code of conduct, to have these values on your website and your annual reports, go a step further to ensure that those people doing business with you understand those values and at least want to align to them as well.
Yes, action plans in place, monitor, track, because it's so important. And this is the power of a resilient supply chain: tracking, measuring, controlling, auditing, visiting, building partnerships. I couldn't agree more. I see the comments chat is on fire. Thank you to my panelists, Federico and Nanda, whilst you were providing an amazing masterclass. Federico and Nanda were replying in real time. So guys, make sure that you don't miss out our supply chain talks, because this is they are really free of charge for now. So I would like, before we close, because time flies quickly, I would like to invite my guests to offer for our audience and for the supply chain leaders to offer one advice, one action item for them in order to build a more resilient supply chain in the upcoming, with the current reality and the upcoming high regulatory environment. Nanda, your closing thought and action item, please.
It's difficult to point out one, but if you look at all what we have heard from Ty and Federico, you know, about code of conduct, ethics, etc. So when customer buy our products, they don't go to our website to see all these things. They talk to people, right? So I think we companies need to invest first in people so that they are completely bought in to the values, and they right from the first instant of contacting the supplier, they look at collaborations. because the people is the most important asset in the business, and companies who develop and nurture the people, I think it applies everywhere in supply chain most, but also in other departments.
Thank you, people. Thank you, Nanda. Federico, your closing thought, action item for the audience.
Yeah, maybe I will be a bit boring. I will repeat people. Make sure that on Sunday evening, you're happy that you will start your working week. You're happy to do what you're going to do on Monday, and the people you're working with, they motivate you. And make sure that every day at the end of the day, you feel fine with yourself. You did something that you have, it's aligned with your principle and what you care, and bring this one within your team, your partners. The people will help to sort out a lot of potential challenges we might face.
Love it. Our producer is, I think, is noting now the leadership aspect. Organize a leadership-related masterclass. Ty, your closing thought and action item, please.
I think don't be afraid to kind of open the data box and try to, I think Nando said it as well about putting people first. And, we produced a report a couple of weeks ago that was alarming because it actually said that even compliance and ethics programs that are very high functioning using data, only 50% of them are actually looking to spend more time or energy on due diligence before engaging third parties. So I think that educating your frontline of defense, educating them on how important the supply chain kind of fragility is, and the fact that, it's one crucial loss in one particular chain could disrupt an entire company, and the risk reputation is huge. So I think it's, again, investing in training, investing in education about how important supply chain due diligence and third-party due diligence really, really is, because otherwise you're just flying blind.
Amazing, Ty. Yes. And before I express my closing thought and action item, I would like to award the Supply Chain Talk mug, of course, to Alex Way. You were on fire today. Thank you. Please attend our future Supply Chain Talk episodes. For me, I think the most important is, and you already you've said it, the leadership, the people that follow you, but also training, knowledge transfer. For me, as a mentor, owning my own business is exactly what I'm doing now, working closely with organizations to mentor them how to build sustainable procurement. And it's all about being ethical and training the people, but also sometimes calling out very non-ethical behaviors, because this is what a mentor does in real-time change. So invest in mentors, trainings, leadership, and retain the right people, because supply chain is almost a mission impossible job. What I would also like to, Alex, you are mentioning lots of comments. We don't have time. Thank you so much. I would like also to invite our audience to attend the next week episode. Is about navigating ESG and supply chain risks by building resilient and responsible networks. At the same time, please make sure that you dial in via the website to get the full episode experience. I would like to thank you, Nanda, Federico, and Ty, for your expertise and your masterclass. I hope you enjoyed today's debate, and really looking forward to having you on my future shows. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.